Welcome to the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan, sci-fi and fantasy author. Like you, I've got a lot on my plate. What with many children, a full-time job, a homestead, and loads of other responsibilities. I'm here to bring you inspiration, positivity, and community around having a busy life and still wanting to chase that author dream, even if you have to take a casual approach. For more information about the podcast, me, or my books, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's get started. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 131 of the podcast. Today is Monday, August 12th, 2024, as I record this. And today I'm talking to Abdul Azeez about writing as a life-saving practice. Talk a little bit about some of his mental health concerns that he has had in the past and how writing has helped him come out of that, and how he leverages writing to live a more positive and healthy life. I think you'll want to stick around for that conversation because if you're like me, writing is definitely very important to my mental health, and just the creative outlet in general is very good for me. So I think you'll really enjoy that part of the conversation. So in author, actually, we're gonna go with the podcast. Excuse me, the homesteading news. If I can get my words all together properly, it's been one of those days, I guess. Homestead news. Not a lot other than the past week I've been working on the stanchion. So a stanchion it's a really weird word for essentially a stand you put your animal in that locks them in place so that you can milk them. Now, the cow that we have, her name's Ginger. We've been told that she's really patient and will stand still wherever you milk her. So the previous owners would just go out into the fields to milk her, which is fine. I mean, I think we may end up doing that if she does prove to be as docile as they say when she's in milk. But we'll have more cows someday, whether it's Ginger's babies or we acquire another cow. They're not always as soft as Ginger. So we figured, let's build a stanchion. Let's get her trained to it just in case. Plus, in the winter, we're going to want to milk her in the stanchion anyway, because going out in the deep snow to try to milk her in the middle of the field it's not going to be fun. So, build the stanchion is all put together. I haven't put the locking mechanism in place to keep her head in so she can't back out, but I'm not too worried about that. We had to fight with her for a little bit. She's a little stubborn. I don't know if she was scared to go in or if she just didn't want to, but we had a little bit of a push and pull shove war with her, and she won. I mean, she's a 1,500-pound animal. I don't weigh anywhere close to that much. My wife and I put together are still not even a fifth of that. So, yeah, it was a little bit of a fight. And then we realized she just needed a better motivator. So there's two different sets of grain that we use to motivate our animals. Our goats respond to this goat feed grain that's covered in molasses. It's very sweet. It's pretty much like candy to them. That motivates the goats. Well, little did we know that the goat grain for Ginger is a good motivator. We've been giving her cow grain, which doesn't have quite as much molasses on it, but all we did was pull out the goat grain, and her eyes went all wide, and she pretty much ran into that stanchion. So that's good. Now we know she just needs a better motivator, and she went in. Pretty much, we're all ready to go for this calf. Build the calving pen. It's just a little separated off pen inside the normal one. So when the calf is born, we can plop it in there. And it can still be with the goats. He'll see them through it's called cattle panel. It's pretty much just this really thin bar that they can see through and not feel like they're alone, because cows don't really like being alone either. They can be, but they're better with their herd animals, so they prefer to be with other animals. So now we're just waiting. At this point, we don't know when Ginger will have the baby, but we've been told her due date was August 13th, which is tomorrow. So, like humans, I mean, it could happen any day, could happen early, could happen late, but we're just waiting for that. And then we need to adjust to milking an animal twice a day and getting gallons and gallons of milk every day. We already have some plans for that. We're beginning our meat chickens this week in the mail. Yes, you can get chicks in the mail if you didn't know that. So I'll get a call from the post office, go pick up the chicks from the post office, and we will be giving them their feed soaked in milk because it'll help them get more protein. Obviously, milk has a lot of protein in it. So if we can soak their feed in it, hopefully we can feed them less of the actual feed, and the milk will help them go a little bit further. It'll help them grow faster and stronger too. So it'll be a fun experience, and that'll help with the milk consumption for at least 8 weeks. The chicks will grow to full size and be ready for butchering in 8 weeks from now. So crazy how fast that happens, because the egg laying chicks take forever to grow. But yeah, that's it from like the cow standpoint. Our kitten, or excuse me, Wilma did have another litter of kittens. This time it's seven. So now we have seven little kittens. They're like 2 days old. I was actually out milking their goat. We have one goat in milk right now. I was milking the goat and I heard our cat making some weird noises. And I was like, oh, I bet it's time. I bet she's having those babies. And sure enough, she did. She always has the baby's in a really awkward spot. So this time she chose to have them right next to the open bale of hay that I use to feed the goats and the cow. So pretty much every time I get in that bale of hay, it rains down hay onto the cats. Try and keep them as clean as possible, but I mean, she dropped them right there. I don't know what to do. I'm gonna let them get a little bit older, and then I'll help transport them to a better location. They're fine. She cleans them off, and it's not a big deal. But still, I feel bad that every time I'm getting that open bale of hay, the open bale of hay will disappear eventually. But still, it's not as super safe as we're moving other big 100-pound bales around. I don't want them to get crushed or anything like that. So, but yeah, more animals. And now it's just about letting them grow up so that we can find them new homes, or maybe our neighbors will need some more mousers because they're excellent mousers. That's why we have cats, just to keep the mouse population down. When we first moved in, we had tons of mice problems. Now we don't because we have all the cats. So my wife doesn't love the cats, but they serve a purpose, and there you go. They're very helpful on that front. On the homestead, there's really nothing else. That's where we are today, and just excited for the calf. Now, in the author news, this is kind of like podcast author news. I had the opportunity to join Human Stornagel on his podcast, The Greatest Podcast in the Multiverse. We talk a little bit about how I find time to write. Despite the circumstances of my life, despite everything going on, I actually am pretty good about finding time to write every day. So we talk a little bit about that. I talk about my homestead. I'd go more in depth into what Dragon Blooded is about. So if you're interested in that podcast, I'll put a link in the show notes. You can take a look at that. If you don't know, Herman was on my podcast a few podcasts ago, and so I was pleased to be able to join him for his podcast. I had a great time. Hopefully, you can learn some things about being able to write effectively and efficiently, and slipping in those 15-minute increments where you can. There's ways to do it, and I hopefully that provides some insights for you. But other than that, I mentioned the last week on the podcast that Dragon Blooded is with the copy editor. She said it will take about 4 weeks to get back to me, which is fine. I mean, I'm in no hurry. After that, I'll be sending it out to ARC readers. Now, my ARC team is a little bit smaller for Dragon Blooded, and that's primarily because I haven't been on social media asking for people to join. Social media is still a struggle for me right now, so I'm not worrying too much about it. But Dragon Blooded is a little more than a month away, which I'm very excited about. That has left me room to write other things. I did start getting back into Dwarf Blooded last week, but with the turn of the month, I'm now writing another short story, which I think I mentioned last week. It's a little bit of a sci-fi mystery type short story, something I've never written before, but it's really fun. I think it has an interesting premise. It's almost a lead into another series of books that I want to write that I've had an idea for. This would be the prequel for it. I don't like to take my story ideas for novels and put them into short stories, because that to me feels like one of two things. It's either a wasted story, because once it's a complete story, even in short format, I feel like I've exhausted that idea, which maybe that's a good thing for some people, but I don't want I don't want to waste that idea on such a short story. I want to build it. I want to flesh it out. And two, I don't want to, I guess, stunt my creativity around that story. So I've taken kind of the world of this other story that I've thought about and put it into a condensed format, which is essentially a story of the parents of the main character that will be happening in the novel that I will write someday. I say someday because I don't know when I'll actually get to it, but I'm not going to ruin this idea. Okay, it's going to work out great. So that's why I'm working on the short story. I'm about 6,000 words into it. I have a pretty good head start. Don't know how long it's going to be. My limit's 17,000. The last four times I've written a short story, they've always butted up right against that limit. So I anticipate that being the same here. Who knows? Maybe I'll surprise myself and I'll write a 12,000 word short story. That would be lovely. Be the first time, but it's possible. Other than that, really just want to get the short story done and then dive back into Dwarf Blooded and get that book done as quickly as possible. I've thought about some revisions I do need to make to the second book for cohesivity between the three books. Not too worried about it. I don't think it's major edits, so that's good. And then still just plinking along with the cover. So I have kind of mock-ups of all six covers of the Hidden Heritage series. and I'm pretty happy with most of them. Dwarf Blooded is the third book. I'm not happy with that cover, so I have quite a bit of tweaking on that one to get it to a place that doesn't make me want to cry or throw it up against the wall. Pick your emotion. Regardless, that's yeah where we are with the books and with the publishing. So other than that, yeah, if you're listening today, tell me where you're listening from. I love to get pictures and hear comments from people where they listen. I like to listen to podcasts while I'm doing chores in the morning and afternoon. So I'm always seeing goats and fields and cows and chickens and doing all those things while I'm listening to podcasts. So let me know where you're listening. And then, of course, if you'd like to support the show, you can get extra Q&A sessions. I do plan on putting some more video information about my homestead as soon as things settle down a little bit with the baby, then we'll be able to do that. Right now, I'm not getting a ton of sleep, so. But until then, I just put the August Q&A session up last week. I talk a lot more about my writing process and co-authoring and my experience with that. And it's about a 30-minute episode, so nothing too crazy. It's just me answering common questions that I get. If, of course, you have questions for me, send them my way. And then, yeah, the Patreon is just a couple dollars a month, a cup of black coffee if you do that. I'm not a coffee drinker, but as an example, that is something that if you're willing to, you can donate, or for a couple cups of coffee if you're feeling generous. I'd appreciate any support you have if you like the show. Obviously, no support. I'll continue doing the show regardless, but your support is very much appreciated. So, with that, we can go ahead and shift over to the interview portion with Abdul Azeez. Hey, Abdul, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Dan?
Doing very, very well. Really excited to learn more about you and your writing and your history. But before we get into all that fun stuff, how long have you been writing and publishing?
So I've been writing this. I've only had one book written, but I've been writing it for about 4 years.
Okay. Is
And
it something you've always wanted to do, right? Or,
yeah, it's something I always wanted to do ever since I was a kid. I figured there's always like the time where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do it eventually. I'm gonna do it eventually, but you don't always have that time. So I was like, eventually I had to sit down and write it.
mm,
Tomorrow is not always promised. So you have to write it eventually instead of procrastinating. But I always had these ideas in my head. So,
that's very cool. Now you've published, you said one book so far, and that is Outer Realm Advent of Fire. Is that correct?
yes.
Nice. Where did you draw the inspiration for this book specifically?
Well, it's a wide net. Like it's mostly like philosophy and like myth, like the Promethean myth, and sometimes music. Like what will happen is I don't watch a lot of music videos, but I watch music. I listen to I listen to music a lot. And sometimes like the artist would say something or they would convey something and I would like make a story or a character out of that. And then that would inspire me to write something.
That's
Yeah,
really
and
cool.
then yeah.
So is there a specific song that inspired this story, or is it just like a collection of songs that you
Well,
were
it's a
listening to?
collection of songs. Yeah.
Nice. What type of music is that?
Um, it's mostly rock and mostly heavy metal,
Hmm.
but I listen to other genres as well. I'm not an elitist, you know. It's
Yeah,
like a lot of metal fans are like elitist, like
that's true. They can be, but I mean, I think it's awesome that you draw inspiration from that. I am the same way where I can listen to a song and the creativity just kind of flows through your mind, and you can't help but think of stories because
Mhm.
of the music. And I think that's so. Did you have a playlist to listen to while you wrote this book?
Honestly, that I listen. I would put. I would just listen to like heavy metal workout music on like Apple Music or Spotify at the time, because I think I had Spotify, and also ambient sounds,
Mm.
like instrumental sounds, Beethoven. Yeah, it's mostly random stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's awesome. I know there's a lot of people who can't listen to anything while they write. I can. I can't while I'm editing, but I can while I'm writing. Do you find you like to have music playing while you're writing?
Yes, I like to listen to music while I'm writing. 'Cause I get lost in it almost, and it's like soothing. But I agree with you with the editing part. I can't listen to music while I edit because editing is like a very specific thing. You have to like comb through all the detail and stuff like that.
Agreed, and I seem to get lost in it too much when I'm editing. So, and I forget that I'm supposed to be editing. So that's why I can't while I'm editing because I need to focus more on the details. But when you're writing, it's pretty easy just to kind of let it flow. Um, and yeah, I think that's awesome. I don't have a specific playlist though. I just listen to kind of, I let my YouTube music find random music for me while I'm going, and that seems to work well for me. But I'm curious to know because you mentioned that you've always wanted to write, and procrastination is very easy when it comes to writing a book. I've experienced it all the time. So, what changed? Was there a single event that changed your experience that made you think, now is the time to write a book, or just curious to know what went into that?
Um, I wouldn't say it's a collection of events because I've been hospitalized before for mental health issues and stuff. And that's what got me thinking like, I need a reason to like to live and to like do things in life. And also COVID made me realize about mortality and and like how you could easily just drop one day and like you don't want to regret at not doing things. So it was a combination of those things that made me like fuel my passion for writing because I realized I was very unhappy for a while and a lot of it had to do with me not doing what I want to do in life.
I think that's a really important thing to recognize. And you did find that it was cathartic then. How did it
Yeah.
help you through these? How did writing help you through that time?
Well, it helps you escape almost. And like, I don't know how else to put it, but like once you write things, especially fiction, you kind of control everything. Unlike life, that's not a lot of control. You don't have control over a lot of things in life. And you're kind of like the god, and you kind of have to have the fate. You can have the character have any fate that you want him or her to have and like that kind of that type of autonomy and like agency that it gave me it helped me realize that this was something I wanted to do, because it's like I can now do things and it makes me feel more more than.
Yeah, I mean, I get a similar thing when I'm reading as well. And I know there's a lot of people that will read a lot of books because it does help them kind of escape. Writing it does feel a little bit different than reading. Um, but yeah, I totally understand that escaping and being able to control everything. Curious, this is just a random question, but have you ever experienced lucid dreaming before? Where you can control your dreams while you're sleeping? Is that something you've experienced?
Yeah, so I don't dream lucid dreams that often. It's part of the mental illness, like to
Mm,
not dream that often. Well, everyone dreams, but just like remembering your dreams and lucid dreams. But
right.
I've, the amount of lucid dreams I've had has been very memorable
Hmm.
almost because I feel like they seem they seem like normal, but like I can do things within them. Like, oh, take out the trash or go to the bathroom or wash the plates or like wear a different shirt or go for a run or something. And I can actively decide to do those things. And I know that I'm dreaming for some reason and I don't wake up. So that's been my experience with lucid dreams.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a similar thing to being able to control while writing, to be able to shape the world, to be able to shape the characters. And yeah, it's a good feeling to feel in control while writing. At least I've experienced that as well. So I'm curious to know about the themes of your book. Tell us a little bit about Outer Realm and what it's about. I'm just curious.
So I'm gonna say what the characters and the plot is a little bit, and then I'm gonna explain it like what it means metaphorically and stuff as well.
Great. I love
So
it.
it's about this guy named Lord Albert Franklin, his brother got assassinated. They don't know who did it, but they all suspect it was him. And he's trying to reclaim the throne of Ayodele, which is the place that they live in. And so he's fighting his rival Hector, who says that he's the heir to the throne, that he's Gavin, his brother. He's the previous king is his father. That's what he's saying. But and so they have this conflict, and then he meets this being called Prague that says he's going to destroy humanity and like kind. I use the term like kind because there are elves and dwarves and different creatures as well that are also humanoid as well. And so then they have that's when the mysticism and all the things start to happen, and they realize that he goes home and he realizes that there are other beings from the outer realm. There are aliens and stuff. And he comes in contact with another alien called Frogger. And Frogger tells him that she wants to prevent catastrophe. And like what she means by that is that there's a multiverse when which something happens, this horrible event happened, caused this chain of events. And she wants to prevent it from happening. And she tells him that she can see his future and stuff. And the book sort of recounts this event and how it became to be. So that's the plot of the book so far. But like the themes of it is like so Albert is about 63 years old and he feels like he hasn't really accomplished anything. He's been living in his brother's shadow for a long time, and then when his brother finally dies, he sees an opportunity to become the king and become influential and become a great king of his name. But then that opens up Pandora's box of people thinking that he killed his brother and stuff like that. And what all he wants to do is to achieve greatness and to achieve power almost. And then that's like a cautionary tale, and it often leads to his downfall because he wants to continue to obtain things and obtain power. And also, there's the whole idea of death and mortality, and like how you don't have much time. I don't want to spoil too much, but how you don't have much time and you have to do certain things. And then the idea of power, claiming power or wanting power, could corrupt people.
Wow, that sounds very intense. Sounds really amazing though. So
Thank
would
you.
you consider this sci fantasy? Because like, with the aliens aspect, the extraterrestrial with combined with this kind of fantasy elements, would you consider it a sci-fi fantasy combination book, or is it mostly
Yeah,
fantasy?
I would consider it a sci-fi fantasy. Because it's supposed to be a series and it becomes more of a sci-fi as you move on,
Hmm.
but it is routed in that fantasy aspect as well. So I consider it a sci-fi fantasy. Yeah.
Wow. So you have all the books planned then for the whole
Yeah, I've
series,
actually
or
written an outline. It's like
it's
I think it was like 50 pages or something of this
wow.
outline. Yeah.
And that's for the whole series, though,
Well, most of it. Yeah.
most of it. How many books do you have planned to be in it?
I would say maybe around 8 or 7,
Okay, that's a lot.
depending. Yeah. This one was supposed to be one book, but it turned out to be 2 books when
Okay.
I was writing it. And it was like it was like 1,000 pages when I first finished it. And I was like and
Wow. That is
yeah.
impressive. That's a lot of words. Did you feel like you had to split it up because of the word count, or was it just the story just felt like there was a natural break to make it two
Yeah,
books?
it was because of the word count because no one was gonna publish that 1,000 page book like a thesaurus, but and it was also because thematically it started to change after a while.
Mm,
The themes of the book and like the characters and their behaviors and stuff.
yeah. I mean, it's great that you were able to break it up. I don't love editing, so that type of thing would stress me out. but
It
maybe
did. It
how did it
did.
stress you out? It's not the easiest thing in the world. So what was the total word count for the first book, if you don't mind me asking? When it was
I
combined,
honestly, I honestly don't remember.
long.
It was long, yeah.
True. I think that's awesome though. So, how you mentioned that you're a plotter and you've plotted most of this stuff out. Oh, we never got into the metaphorical piece of the story. You went into the depth of it and curious to know the meaning behind that if you can reveal it, if it's not a giveaway to the story.
Um, the the metaphor is just that it deals with the themes of nihilism and like how to combat nihilism. And everyone is trying to do it their own way. They're trying to seek power. Some people seek religion, some people seek ideology, some people just don't care. And like all the characters, they want to avoid this being or this dread of not things not being going the way they want them to go almost. And they're trying to avoid all this. And the theme of the book is essentially telling people that they can live beyond certain things, beyond religion and beyond a certain ideology and beyond nihilism. And like Prague, he wants to destroy everything. Like kind of like when you think of nihilism, it ends all things. Nothing matters. It deconstructs a lot of things, and all the things that are sacred are not so sacred. And what the book is trying to do is trying to fight those things and try to tell you that you decide what is sacred and what is not sacred. You don't let these outside forces determine that, even if they're true somehow. So that's like this the overarching theme of the book is just fighting nihilism.
That's fascinating. That's very, very cool. So for those people who are listening, can you explain nihilism a little bit? Kind of, I know some people
Yeah,
may not
yeah.
have heard that before.
I mean, it's a very common term, and the it can be complex, but it's basically telling people that nothing matters. There is no afterlife, there is no gods, there is no hope, there is no future. Everything is essentially pointless. Everything you do in life is pointless. I'm just defining it. I'm just saying, yeah.
No, that's
But
perfect. I wasn't asking for a perfect, definition. I think that's awesome. It's a perfect explanation for it. But, what a really cool way to bring that into a fantasy slash sci-fi story to, talk about the challenges of that and overcoming it and, what that could look like in this world setting. Did you know that you wanted it to be a metaphor for that before you started writing it, or did that just come out while you were writing?
yeah, that was actually part of the mental breakdown that I had. I mean, I
Okay.
had several mental breakdowns, but the one that I remember recently is that I was thinking, well, what's the point of living? What's the point of doing anything?
Mm.
Like this is pointless. I don't have a drive. I don't have goals. And like if there is no afterlife, if there's no higher power or anything, then why continue? And I needed a reason to do that. I needed an answer to that question.
Do you feel like you found a better answer to that through your writing?
Yeah, I think I have found an answer to it, and well, ironic. You just brought it up, writing.
Hmm.
That can be your reason for doing something, like your passion, and you just define certain things because we don't know if there's no higher power or not. We just say that there is one or there isn't one, but we just sort of think about these things. And I think it's much simpler than we allow ourselves to believe. I think that we think too much. Like things are very simple. You do what makes you feel good, and you do that until you die. And that's all that really matters in the end, because you define what is good or what is bad or what beneficial to you.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think it brings up a good point about humans, just in general, is having a purpose, having something to live for, whether that's a person or a hobby or, whatever it is, that, living purpose lessly, I don't even know if that's a word. I just made that up. Living without purpose is not good for the human mind. Like it's wandering around aimlessly, whatever that purpose is, whether that be religion of any type or, serving others or writing or whatever, maybe being a doctor, whatever that may be, having that purpose is essential to just being able to function, particularly with people who struggle with mental health issues. So it sounds like writing did become that for you, and that helped immensely. Sounds like.
Yeah, I would agree with that analysis. Also, I think it's the whole idea of controlling what you can control, like the
Right.
Stoics say, like, controlling what you can control, not to focus on things that are above you. And that's when I realized, like, worrying about all this afterlife and like what is the purpose of what you're doing and stuff, it doesn't do you any good. It's like I said, you do what makes you feel good. And that's something that you can't debate with anybody. You can debate God, you can debate, nihilism and existentialism and absurdism with a bunch of other people, but you can't tell me how that this doesn't make me feel good, what I'm doing. And as long as you follow that compass, then you'll be all right.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing perspective to have. It can be that shining light in the darkness for sure. Those hard times. I'm curious to know, and you, if this is too private, definitely let me know. But how much more difficult is it to write with mental health challenges? I know that it probably does affect your writing, but what are some of the challenges that comes with that?
Well, it's a double-edged sword. You
Mm,
become very a prolific writer because you have mental illness, because you have so many ideas coming into your head.
that's fair.
But you don't become the best editor.
Mm,
Like certain your thoughts. And I don't. This is like a time in my life when I wasn't taking medication.
mm.
Your thoughts become disorganized and stuff, and it becomes difficult to make sense of a lot of things, and you just write random stuff, a lot of prolific random stuff, and some of it is crucial and does help with the book, but it's a lot of random stuff. But you can also write about your demons and your inner voices and stuff like that, and you really know how to get to people's psyche and really hurt them. And writing villains become very easy. It becomes an easy thing.
Pretty crazy how that works. But yeah, I know what you
Yeah.
mean. Though I understand on the editing front because editing is a challenge for myself as well. I actually have ADHD and it's so much easier to just write random things. Like you said,
Hmm.
just let it go, let it go. But editing, it's a discipline thing for me. It's challenging. What did you do to get through the editing? That was a challenge. Did you have any specific things you employed to make it work?
Well, one thing that does help, I know this is gonna sound very simple. Like there's this audio trick on Microsoft Word where you can have them read it to you.
Yeah,
And I use that a lot. And when you hear the voice, then that's when you can edit and you go like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. As opposed
yeah.
to when you're reading it by yourself, you don't see it that way.
Hmm.
But yeah, I use that a lot. And also, one thing that I like that I don't like in books is my pet peeve is like when the font is so small. Like I don't
Mm,
have any vision problems, but when the font is small, my eyes will jump over the sentences and stuff. So what I started to do when I was editing my book, I would put 1.5 or 2 space font, and like I would make the font like 14,
Okay.
and I would also like highlight certain passages and stuff. That way my eyes would gravitate towards certain things.
I think that's smart. I've never thought
And
about that before.
it's also like a video game almost.
Yeah,
Um, so when you write something and you write it, you don't think about plot holes and stuff the first time around. The
right.
second time around, when you're editing, you want to break your work. Like it's a term like a video game where testers want to break the game almost. So
Mm-hmm.
your goal is to make sure that you catch all the bugs before they go out.
Yeah. I love that treating it like a video game because it is very similar in that way when you're trying to catch the mistakes and everything. That mindset sounds like it might be helpful. Now, did you print this all out when you were editing, or
Oh,
did you do it all digitally?
I did both.
Both. Okay, great. I
Yeah,
think
it
that's
was
awesome.
very expensive.
Wow, that's the crazy thing. It's amazing how expensive. I've actually found for me, it was cheaper to format the book and go to like one of those print on demand shops like Book Vault, for example, and just print it bound as a book. It's cheaper to do that than to go to a store, a copy store and print it and spiral bind it. It was just way more expensive. So that's what I ended up doing on my last one. I just, formatted it and did a one-time print so I could get the book and then we edited it that way. But I mean,
Yeah, I'll do that next time. Now that I think
yeah, I mean, it was like a difference between $30 printing versus like seven. So it was, well,
it.
your book, I imagine, was there even a spiral bound binder that could hold it
There was
or
two.
two?
There's
Okay.
two binders, yeah.
Yeah. To say, surely you'd have to do two, and you did front and back, I would
Yeah.
imagine. That's crazy. So is the next book panning out to be as long as the first one or longer?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And all eight books are probably going to be about this long, do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
So how do you keep track of details
Oh,
between the books?
so this is where the computer comes in handy.
Okay,
I
sure.
have like so when I first wrote the book, I was like adding future the way I edited it was like yellow meant pay attention to these details. Green meant this doesn't make any sense. There's some conflict. And blue meant future events. So I would highlight things and add like future events, like this character is going to get resurrected, or this character is going to die, or
Sure.
because this character says this, they're envious of another character. And I put all those blue things in a document called future events, and I just keep writing them down and stuff. And like,
Mm.
yeah.
So do you resolve them when those future events pass? Do you go back to the notes and cross them off as you pass through them or
Yeah,
not?
sometimes. Yeah.
Sometimes.
I mean, I don't use all of the events because that's the thing. Like when you write an outline, you don't use everything as you continue to write because some things just don't make sense or they can be written another way. But for the most part, yeah, I do check them
I mean, that's pretty impressive. I am not a plotter. So
all.
I love talking to plotters because the way your mind works is just so much different than mine. I don't plot anything. I just discover it as I'm writing it. I write absolutely zero outline. So the idea of a 50-page outline makes my head explode because I can't even imagine. That's so impressive. Um, but it's great. It's hearing the different ways that people write and what works for them. This is just a random question because I'm curious. Why did you choose the color green for conflict? Like I feel like orange or red might be a little bit more but I don't know.
Because I was thinking of the Incredible Hulk.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. That actually does make sense when you think about it that way. I'm colorblind too, so I don't, colors are tricky for me. But yeah, when I heard green conflict, I was like, oh, there's got to be a story behind that. So That's great. Now, would you so you highlight that like in the print version? Is that how you do it, or you highlight it on the computer?
I
Which
highlighted on the computer.
okay. Is it trouble to remove all of that before you actually get to the printing? Or
Yes.
but
Because when I
good.
have to edit it, I have to take all because like there's like I love parentheses. I
Mm,
put parentheses in everything, but it's not always part of the novel. So when I have to send it to the publisher, I have to get rid of all those pages of parentheses and explanations and stuff like that. And I have to get rid of all the highlights and stuff so that it makes sense as a book writing. Like it doesn't
yeah.
look like a messy because it gets messy when you have all those plot details.
Hmm. So it doesn't look like a high school student's textbook
Yeah.
with all the highlights and the underlines and everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's great. Have you ever accidentally missed some when you got to the published stage, or were you able to catch all of them?
Oh, I miss some. Some of them are still in there.
It happens.
But yeah, it happens. That's the thing when I with my first book, I was so anal about little things. I think I read it like 6 times. I had it read to me like 10 times. And then when I first finally got published and there was like a little spelling error with capitalization, I was like, oh no, people are
It's,
gonna notice that.
it's honestly so frustrating, right? It's one of those things where I similar. I had a professional editor go through and edit it. I edited it myself 3 or 4 times, had a proofreader go through it, and still somehow those mistakes somehow managed to make it into the publication. And you're reading something
Yeah.
again, you're like, come on, how did how did you get in there? It's crazy. But I think there's a lot of people that have tolerance for that. So maybe they're not as, frustrated with those typos as people may have used to been. Curious to know from like process, because your books are somewhat lengthy and editing can be a challenge. But how long were you working? I think you said 4 years you were working on this first book. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's technically the second book as well because like it was
Right. That's
one
right.
book that I split into two. But yeah, it was like 4 years and I think it helped that I didn't have a job that at
Hmm.
that time. So like I had a lot of free time and I was like editing every day like a mad person and like
Hmm.
writing every day. And like I even got these glasses for the computer so I wouldn't strain my eyes. So I would wake up like 5 o'clock and just start typing and doing stuff like that.
That's smart. I used to have some of those glasses, but my kids got a hold of them and broke off the things to hold on to your ears. So now they're just single. They don't work very well, but it's good. The blue light filtering glasses are very good. Um, are there other considerations, other things that you have to account for because of your mental health concerns with writing, or with the blue light glasses? Are you able to just get right in and write?
Well, because my mental illness is bipolar disorder,
Mm,
bipolar one, you can have manic episodes where you
mm,
just have energy to do things and you just type things. And then you can be very depressed and you never want to see your work again.
mm,
And like there's this problem with the mental illness, even with the medication, is that you're not consistent on criticizing your own work. Like I'll read a passage and I'll go like, this is the best thing since Swiss cheese. And then I'll read that same passage again and I'll be like, this is utter garbage.
uh-huh, yeah.
Yeah, so I have to like really determine what is good and what is not good. And that takes time, yeah.
Well, fortunately, you're not rushed, right? You can take your time. But this is probably a tricky question. How do you feel like it's done? Like how do you reach a point where you feel like it's enough when you still have those thoughts bouncing around in your head about what's good and what's not?
I don't think you reach a point.
You know, fair enough. I mean, I'm inclined to agree. At some point, you just have to be done, right?
Yeah, I think at some point you just have to be like, oh, this has to be done.
Hmm.
Because like you'll keep editing and like doing little things and changing things all over again.
Yeah. I think if someone were to look at the same book, they could be editing it for their entire lives
Yeah.
because there's always something that might be better or something that might, not be good. And I like to tell people when I think about editing, I try to keep in mind that there's lots of rights, right? There's lots of really good things. And sometimes if you over edit something, you're just changing something that's good to something that's also good. And so, at some point you just have to stop because it's good enough. Stop editing because you're just going to keep switching different goods for other goods. And that's just not
Yeah.
productive. You might as well just leave it as good as it is today and move on to write something different. So, but it's worked for me. It helps me stop editing if I feel like I'm nervous about publishing it. So, given the length of your books, it's going to take a number of years probably to get these out. Do you have any goals or plans for this whole series, or is it you're just working on it as fast as you can and it'll come when it comes?
I think it'll come when it comes. I try not to rush it because I don't think you can really rush art
True.
if you want
Right.
the product to be good, you know. I think what was it? Shigeru Miyamoto said that a rush game is bad
Mm,
forever, you know, but a game that's delayed can eventually become a good game.
yeah,
So I think it's true for products as well. And
agreed.
I'm still young. It's not gonna take 100 years.
That's that's true. Yes. You do appear young. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but you appear young, so that gives you plenty of time to work on it. But I think you may have noticed this. It does get easier over time. So your first book, I'm saying you proverbially, I'm not talking specifically about you. Your first book may take years, and then the next one may take fewer years, and then maybe you'll shorten it and shorten it over time. Not because you're trying to go fast, but you just get used to the process. It's just like it starts feeling more natural the more you do it. So. Hopefully you'll experience that as you keep writing these
Yeah.
out. That'll be very helpful. Well, are there any specific tips or tricks that you can offer to someone who hasn't started writing and they maybe don't know where to start?
I would say start. I know that sounds very simplistic, but like I remember I had a problem with starting because I was like, oh, this sounds stupid and this sounds dumb, and
Hmm.
I don't know if people will want to publish this or if I'll make any money out of this. I probably shouldn't dip my toe into the pool or something. But I think you have to ignore those voices and you have to just sort of write. And like for your first book, just write without any criticism and just continue to write. And then you edit it later and then you criticize it later because then you have substance, you have something to edit. Because you're not going to be perfect on your first shot. You know, you craft it like a stone almost, like a sculpture.
No, I love that. That's a perfect explanation. It's very true. I like to think of it as right forward, right? Um, don't look back at first, especially if it's your first book. Just write forward, knowing that you can come back and edit it later. You can fix things, you can change it. I've talked to a lot of people who they've gotten into the habit of they'll write one or two things, a few chapters, then they'll go back and edit those two chapters, and then they'll go back and edit them again, and then they'll go back and edit them again, and then they don't actually finish the book because they're so busy editing these previous chapters. So at least for me, I agree. Get started and write forward tends to tends to work for me. But yeah, any other thoughts or recommendations for people on how they can be more efficient with their writing?
I would say once you have an idea, just write it down. Make
Mm,
sure you write it down on your phone or your computer or a pen or whatever works for you. And also outlining really helps. It really
mm,
accelerates the process. I know you don't outline that often, but it does. Once you have an outline, then you can just speed write almost. It's like it
yeah.
really helps. And also try to, there's one thing that I did is I tried not to read too much when as I was writing.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
because I didn't want to become influenced by other things too much. Because you can pick up other people's styles and stuff, and then you mix it with your own, and it becomes derivative on. So to make it original, just try to like be isolated with your writing.
Hmm.
Just continue. You can have influences. Like I had lots of influences, but I didn't like watch too many movies or play too many games and stuff as I was writing because I wanted it to be authentic.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fair. I know that some people will intentionally read out of the genre they're writing in. So, like, let's say you're writing a sci-fi fantasy, they spend all their time reading a romance, romance books or like country western, where it's just such a different that, there's not a risk or thought of potentially bringing things in. But yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that, particularly if it works for you. For me, when I'm writing a lot, I don't read a lot from a time perspective, right? Because there's only 24 hours in a day, and oftentimes when I get a little free block of time, the options are would you either write or would you rather read? And I usually choose write because, I don't have time for both always. So it's usually how it pans out for me. But I think those are excellent pieces of advice. Just out of curiosity, what do you use to write your books? Are you writing in like Microsoft Word? I think you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I use for the outlines I use Google Docs, and
Okay,
then for the actual writing I use Microsoft Word.
nice. This is just a silly question. Do the Microsoft Word files ever crash because they're so big?
Yes.
Okay. I was wondering that because I have worked with not my books. I mean, my books are decently long, but no, definitely not as long as yours. I was wondering if it crashed and so you have to cut them up in a different like Microsoft
Yeah.
file, part one, part two, part three.
I'll cut them
Fascinating.
up by like chapters like 14 to 16.
That's crazy. That is crazy. So there you go. There's a consideration. If you're writing a really long book, consider breaking things up so the program doesn't lose its mind. But that's crazy. It's something to be proud of, though. I mean, it sounds like you put a lot of work into it, and you've got this amazing book, and potentially seven more or more. You're gonna be the next Robert Jordan over here, writing these super long books. But yeah, so I would love to keep chatting. We are running a little bit short on time. So where can people find more information about you and your books if they want to check it out?
The books are on gotopublish.com. You can type Outer Realm Advent of Fire. You can go on Amazon, type in Outer Realm Advent of Fire, or you can go on my website, author Abdul Azeez.
.com, is that right?
Yeah.com.
Perfect. Very good. Well, I'll make sure all those links are in the show notes so that people can access those if they want to take a look at them. But yeah, thank you so much for your insight. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you really enjoyed that conversation. Talking to Abdul was very enlightening, and hearing his story, hearing about his story and the complexity of it, it got me really excited about writing, and it reminded me about the importance of actually getting words on the page in terms of creativity. Getting them out is just so cathartic, and it helps me stay grounded. Ironically, writing fantasy stories keeps me grounded. So it was a great reminder of that. So next week, I'll be talking to Kelly Allegretti about catharsis in writing and disability representation. So Kelly and I go into depth about the book she's written, why disability representation is important to her, and how it is a cathartic experience for her as well in terms of writing. So I think you want to stick around for that conversation. If you have any questions or comments about what you want to hear about more on the show, definitely email me at dan@thecasualauthor.com or comment on, if you see it on YouTube or on Spotify, wherever you're listening, drop a comment, let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next week.